Today we are going to talk about Grandia 3. I don't have a physical copy to show off to you, so you just get to look at our little post-it note with the word Grandia with the Roman numeral or the number 3 on it. So that's that. Had to pause for a second there. I thought I was going to sneeze, and it turns out I did. I didn't want to put that on camera. No, anyways, we have the 3 here, Grandia 3. It's Grandia 3 for the PlayStation 2. This released around 2002, 2003, 2001. That little area of the early 2000s, around that turn of the millennium. Around this time, we've gotten a lot of really good JRPGs, but we've gotten a lot of copycats as well. Remember in one of my old videos, I believe it was Castle in the Sky, how I talked about a phenomenon where the Laputa effect, where there's a lot of shows, a lot of ideas, steal from this ancient Castle in the Sky idea. Well, this is pulling a little bit from, in my opinion, Final Fantasy X. Around this time, ignore the leitmotif part here for a moment. The Final Fantasy X here released around 2000. It was being developed around the same time as Final Fantasy IX for the PlayStation 1. It released on the PlayStation 2, I believe, in roughly 2000 to 2001, around that time period, and it was fantastic. It was groundbreaking at the time. The graphics, the voice acting was pretty meh, but it was really good, in my opinion. It was one of the better RPGs on the PlayStation 2 system, and it was one of the first as well. So, yeah. But a lot of games came out that were pulling from very similar story beats from Final Fantasy X. One of them being the whole, how you have a heroine, Yuna, has to go on a pilgrimage to various temples to go through a dungeon, go through a puzzle, and then collect a MacGuffin. And then once you have collected all the MacGuffins, you find out that this whole entire pilgrimage is a sham, and you need to beat the bad guy and put a stop to it. That's basically what happens in Tales of Symphonia as well. It's pretty much the exact same story. A lot of people love Tales of Symphonia, but honestly, I honestly feel like that story is taking way too much for Final Fantasy X. I don't know which came first, but it is pulling the exact same tropes and ideas. Grandia 3 is no stranger to this as well. You have to go join your heroine on a pilgrimage to various temples, do a dungeon, do a puzzle, and then you beat the final boss. It's basically the basic gist of Grandia 3. But have no fear, I have written up a handy-dandy little review for Grandia 3. It's basically a comparison between Grandia 3 and Grandia 1, the Grandia games I played. I have not played Grandia 2 because I don't have Grandia 2. You could get Grandia 2 on the PlayStation 2 physically, but I don't have a physical copy, and I may get one in the future, but I don't have one right now, so I haven't played it. I have played 1, and I have played 3, so those are the ones we are going to talk about. We're going to look through my handy-dandy review that I typed up. We're going to go over very basic groups, plot points, categories, that's the word I'm looking for. We have music, plot, world, combat, characters, and we have NPCs as well. I have it written here. You can tell this is a second take. I've already written out some things, but I was way too scatterbrained the first time. The first one I have written here is combat and gameplay. Grandia 3 beats Grandia 1 in almost every single area here. The combat is smooth, it's fun, and it is addicting. The only thing 1 has over 3 is that the speed stat in 1 is far more manageable. It rises with your character's levels, and your characters are getting faster with every level up, and eventually you're going to be really fast, going 1 turn, 2 turns, sometimes 3 turns, before the enemy even gets to go because you've been grinding so high. In 3, your speed stat is reliant on equipment. It does not increase with level ups, and eventually you find that you're very painfully slow. Every time you take a turn, you have to wait long times, and this time can only shorten depending upon equipment, and you have to sacrifice certain things when you're equipping certain equipment. So you have to manage what stats you want to sacrifice, and in my playthrough, I sacrificed speed in favor of using those teleporting items called the mysterious clogs, the ninja slippers, and things like that. Equipping those items allows you to teleport directly to your enemy to attack, instead of having to run to the enemy, because it's a 3D battle screen, just like the first Grandia. You have to run to the enemy and attack. And this time, you get to equip things like mysterious clogs, ninja slippers, and there's a third one that I can't remember the name of right now. You equip them, you can just teleport to attack, and then teleport back or whatever, and it's very good. It makes fighting a lot more easier, because some characters can, in this game, there is a difference here. In Grandia 1, your character can run and then stop and get tired. In Grandia 2, the Grandia 3, I mean, your character will run to the enemy, but then stop and get tired if the enemy's too far away, and you waste your turn. If you have this teleporting item on, characters who are really slow at running, such as your heroine Alfina, who is more of a magic-based character, who can equip physical weapons to attack with, but she needs to teleport to the enemy to attack with instead of having to run, because she'll stop and get exhausted and waste her turn and not get to do anything, and it's pretty sad. So you don't want to have that happen. You want to equip your teleporting items, but then you sacrifice speed, and that really messes things up. Had my characters been as fast as my Grandia 1 characters would, I wouldn't have been so down to the wire. So, yeah, Grandia 3 in terms of combat, we're going to talk a little bit more in how it differentiates, because we've talked about Grandia 1's combat a little bit more in the previous video about Grandia. In this one, we have some slight variations. Magic does not level up in this as you use it. For example, if you equip the fire spell and you use the basic one fire spell a lot, you will not gain fire experience to level up your fire affinity to learn new fire moves. Instead, magic can be obtained by collecting mana eggs. In the first game, you collect mana eggs as well, but you can only use 4 of them per character to unlock fire, water, earth, and wind. And by leveling up these, you can unlock the other combo abilities. For example, fire and wind unlock the lightning affinity. I believe it was wind and water unlock ice, I think. I'm not too sure about that. Earth and fire unlock explosions and ground fire lava stuff. But you get the idea. You get combo abilities by whatever. In Grandia 3, they do away with all of that. Instead, you have various mana eggs that you can equip to your character to increase your affinity for certain elemental-based abilities, but also you can dismantle these mana eggs at the magic shop to obtain spells. And these spells can then be equipped onto your character. You have a maximum total of about 15 slots for your magic abilities. There's tons of magic spells to choose from. Your magical affinity best character is Donna. We'll talk about her when we get to the characters part. In this game, each character has different levels of affinity to magic. You're gonna have a physical-based fighter that prefers to fight physically and not use magic, which means even though you maximize the guy's level out, his magic is probably going to be about 10 or 9 slots instead of 15 slots like your Donna character. And likewise, Donna is not necessarily a physical fighter. So you'll have skills as well. You have skills and spells, 2 different separate things here. Your skills can be used to modify your characters in certain ways. For example, there's Beastmaster that you could equip a skill to that gives you higher damage against beast-type enemies. There's First Master that gets you affinity towards that element. There are things that can let you boost your affinity to use magic. There's some that can increase drop rates, experience rates. You get the idea. They're basically little modifiers, skill modifiers, or whatever. and your characters can equip up to 15 of those as well. Your main character Yuki gets 15 for skill. Ulf, I think, gets 14 or 15 as well. I'm not too sure about that. But each character has different maximums so that you can mix and match your skills and magics to fight with. Some have higher magic stats, like a physical ability to use magic, so they're going to be more affinitized to putting your spells on to use magic, whatever. And some are going to be more physically oriented, like your main character Yugi and the Ulf character. They're going to be more physical oriented. They're going to be your attackers. What else? Each time you go, I'm gonna have to draw this one out as well here. So let's pull out our handy dandy little pen here. We have a turn wheel. We have the wait area. There. Wait. We're gonna call that the wait period. Wait. And then we have the action phase. Your idle phase, or your whatever. You get to your character's just sitting here. This is after you've taken a turn, action, or whatever, and this is the time you have to wait, and you have to wait, and you have to wait. And then once your character gets to here, your action menu opens up. So we're going to call this part action. So once your character has reached here on your wheel, we're going in that way. Right? Okay, so we go here. This is our wait period. Once you're out of the wait period, you're in the waiting phase of your idle phase. And then you can reach here, you take an action. And then you have the action idle phase, which is right around, I believe, here. This is the action phase where you have chosen an action and you're preparing either a spell or a skill, or you're just running to attack the enemy. This is a waiting period as well. And then once you reach here, this is when you finally take action. And then you're in the waiting area, where you're in these little waiting pie chart areas or whatever. So this is the longest time period where you have to just sit there and do nothing. This is the do nothing phase. So practically, it's just all the way from here is waiting period. But I don't know why the action menu separates this part out. But whatever. So your enemies are also on this pie chart. I'm gonna make another circle here because this is very messy as well. So we're just gonna make another circle. Boom, boom, boom. There, it's so much easier. So much easier to understand, or whatever. Let's try to match it up here. Have we matched it up? Alright, that's your wait period, right? So your enemies are also gonna be on this wheel. They're gonna be placed all throughout here. Maybe they're all scattered right there. And then your character might be here, another character could be here, another character could be here, another character could be here. And as your characters, depending upon your speed stats, as I said, your enemies are also going to be fast. Most of them are going to be faster than you, so their turn is going to come first, and then here. Once the action phase has been activated, if they're going to use a spell or a skill, the enemy is going to be glowing, and you could cancel their attack if you are able to go before their preparing phase gets to the initiating phase. So if the enemy is somewhere in this area, and you use, for example, a critical attack. You could use a combo attack or a critical attack. Critical attacks are cancel attacks. They do a little bit more damage. They can launch the enemy into the air for an air combo attack and things like that. But if you cancel the enemy's thing, then you're going to bump them back down onto the idle period. And you're going to cancel their spell. You're going to cancel their magic ability attack. And then they're just going to have to use a regular normal attack. And this is how you use your tactics to stop bosses from using really damaging abilities. You're going to want to have your character go first to cancel their ability, so that they just do a regular attack that's a bit more mitigated, that's a bit more manageable. But yeah, that's how your combat basically goes. Every time your character reaches this little spot here, in the action phase, you get to choose what your character's going to do. Use an item, attack, use a skill, special ability, or use a magical ability. Your special abilities work just like Grandia 1. The more you use your special ability, the better it gets. For example, the main character Yuki has ability that is much like Justin's Dragon Cut. You can use the Dragon Slash multiple times. You have 5, I believe it was 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You get 5 stars for every special attack. And the more you use them, these modify the ability's effectiveness. For example, the first one would be like reduce wait time to use the attack. So if, for example, you use Dragon Cut and takes about 5 seconds to charge up the ability before you take action, getting 1 star in it might reduce it to 3 seconds. Then when you reach the 2nd star, it increases its damage output. So instead of just doing 100% damage, it might do 125% damage. By the time you reach the 3rd one, it might increase the range of the attack. For example, if your damage is, let's make another circle for the enemy field, right? Let's say you're right here. And then enemy is right here, there's another one here, there's another one here, there's another one here, there's another one here. If you use Dragon Cut at level 1, it might, and you pick this one in the middle, it might only be able to get those 4 enemies, but these 2 are left out. If you manage to get 3 stars in your attack, you might be able to increase the range. So if you pick this one right here, your circle could probably be big enough to get everybody and damage everybody. So that's great. That's the ranged part. And then this one's another power increase, so you might get to 150% damage. And then this one's the final mastery ability. It might be damage modifier, it might be something else. All depends on what your special skill ability that you're leveling up is. Some special abilities are healing based, so instead of doing damage, it increases the HP that is healed. It's very, very complex. There's a lot of skills. I'm not going to talk about every single one of them, but it's very good. I'm just going to tell you right now that Grandia 3's combat system is so much better than Grandia 1's in almost every way imaginable. What's next? I have here on this review guide, let me find my, here we go. I have up next on this thing music, so we're going to talk about that next. There's some good music themes in Grandia 3, but I'll have to give the better overall music to Grandia 1. The opening theme has a leitmotif that goes back to this right here, a leitmotif. We're going to talk about that in a second. The opening theme combined with the epic battle theme in Disc 2, there's some good town themes. Grandia 1 is just superior in so many ways. The only thing Grandia 3 has going for it that I can remember in terms of like a theme would have to be that J-pop opening that clashes with the overall tone of the game in itself. It's a decent song, but it just doesn't feel like it belongs to the overall tone. There's a tone in that J-pop theme that fits the Yuki character in regards to that childlike desire for adventure, but I feel like Justin's theme, the leitmotif in Grandia 1, that main theme, also captures that childlike adventurous spirit, but also fits with the tone of the overall game as well. So in a way, the main theme of Grandia 3, while it is memorable, does not fit the game as strongly as the main theme of Grandia 1. A leitmotif, though. Let's talk about that in case you don't know what a leitmotif is. You can always Google it, but I'm going to give you a gist of it. I am in no way a music aficionado in regards to knowing terms and all that stuff, but I know what a leitmotif is. A leitmotif, especially in video games, is where the soundtrack has quite a few themes that feel very similar. They're different arrangements of an overall main theme. For example, you have a slow, sad version of a theme. You have a happy version of a theme. You have the big, fast-paced version of a theme. Some versions of the theme take some instruments out of the overall ensemble of the theme being played. Some increase the tempo of some of the instruments and add instruments in. An example would have to be something like in film. Films have a lot of leitmotifs in regards to the soundtracks, and one of the ones that I can think of off the top of my head would have to be Star Wars and Pirates of the Caribbean. There are leitmotifs in in those films that repeat various melodies in various tones to capture a certain emotion that is to be conveyed, that you're supposed to feel during a certain cutscene. Grandia 1 does this expertly with their characters and their cutscenes, character dynamics and the story and all that stuff. Grandia 3 doesn't do that. It doesn't have a strong leitmotif. The music's just there so that you're not in silence the entire time. And it's just not memorable. Most of the battle themes are forgettable. Most of the town themes. The town theme is okay. The main town theme for Mendy is fine. I was fine with it, but they repeat it for other towns, and I'm not for that. There's one town that you visit late in the game. Where was I? Oh yeah. And there is a town, the final town we could visit in the game, called Raffled Town. And the first time you get there, there's a somber, almost sad theme being played because we're in a very serious point of the story. And I liked that theme. It was a very good theme for that town. But once we pass the sad part, and we get past that into the happier part of the story, the theme is replaced with the Mendy theme. So we have a repeating theme. Instead of a unique Raffled Town theme, we just get the Mendy theme again, and it was disappointing. So a lot of the music, it's just not memorable. We get maybe one or two themes outside of the J-poppy intro theme that doesn't really belong there. So overall, it's just Grandia 1's better in regards to music. Our third category is characters. In terms of party members, if I had to keep it to just the cutscenes only, then Grandia 1 blows 3 out of the ballpark in terms of almost everything. Character growth, moments spent with all of the characters, the amount of cutscenes that we have with these characters. But if I had to add in character interactions with talking to NPCs, I mentioned this in my Grandia 1 review, that one of the best parts of the game to me was just going to the towns and talking to the people, because you could talk to them multiple times, and your characters, your party members, would interact with them. For example, one character would say something, one of your characters would say something, they would say something else, and another one of your characters might say something and interject, and you would have an actual full-blown conversation going on, talking to your NPCs. It was excellent. I loved it. Grandia 3 continues that. And if I were going to incorporate that in regards to character growth, then Grandia 3 does get a lot of major points, because you can learn a lot about your party members just by talking to people, just by talking to NPCs in all of the towns. You learn so much. You have characters that leave your party for the entire game, Miranda and Alonso, around the 1/4 mark. So after 1/4 of the game, 2 characters that you've had for the start of the game leave the party, and you never see them again. However, if you talk to NPCs, revisit towns, and talk to people, and they have new things to say after every major story part, you can return to towns and talk to the people. You get to learn more about Miranda and Alonso, and you get to see what they've been up to. They might have revisited a town, and you get to talk to those NPCs, and they'll tell you what's going on with Miranda and Alonso. You never would have learned that had you not talked to them. It's amazing. It's fantastic. There is good character growth in that I feel like might have just been story beats that were scrapped from the overall main plot that they just had on the cutting room floor, that they just typed in for text boxes for NPCs. They just threw these side plots into that because they were constrained for time or anything like that. But I liked that they did that anyways, so that we had something instead of just not having it at all. So it's worth having it rather than not having. But Grandia 1 has this as well. The talking to the characters, learning about your characters by talking to the NPCs. So, combined with the just overall better cutscenes and character interactions, character growth. A lot of your characters have character growth. Most of your characters in Grandia 3 are static. Yuki is very static. Alfina is very static. Ulf is the same once you get him as when you finish the game with. Alonso is static. Miranda is static. She's probably the only one that gets character growth, but she's also the one you spend the least amount of time with. Donna gets quite a bit of character growth, though, so that's pretty good. She's probably the best character of your main 4 party members, so she's got a lot of good stuff there. But the Grandia 1 set would have an entire party of Donnas, rather than Grandia 3 just having Donna, if that makes sense. So Grandia 1 has better characters. The next little thing on our little thingamajiggy is plot. In terms of plot, Grandia 1 beats 3 in almost every single area. While Grandia 3 has voice acting, much like Grandia 1 did, Yuki, the main character of Grandia 3, his voice actor is very experienced. He's done many things. I believe it's Johnny Young Bosch, if I'm remembering this rightly. I think it's Johnny Young Bosch, or is it Yuri Lowenthal? I get the two mixed up. I'm gonna confirm this real quick. Confirmed it. It's Johnny Young Bosch, the Ichigo's voice actor. That guy is amazing. So he really elevates Yuki's lines, despite having a lot of generic dialogue. The skill, the experience of the dubbing cast elevates a lot of what's being written, of what they're actually saying. So that's pretty good. But most of the dialogue is choppy. Most of the villains are extremely underwritten. Some just vanish from the story entirely. There's one dude, Grau, whom you learn nothing about. And in the final dungeon, he betrays the main villain, Emilius, to revive Zorn, who is the main villain. And this is the one point in the entire game where you learn his name. And then he dies immediately. Another villain is just some blonde dude who we meet at the start of the game, who was chasing our heroine, Alfina. He just leaves the plot around the final dungeon. He just says, "I'm out." And then you hear nothing about him afterwards. No idea about his whereabouts. There's no epilogue with the character. He's just gone. Some character storylines, though, we do see an ending, like I mentioned. Through the end credits stuff, there's some slideshow things, so that's pretty cool. And through NPCs, they talk about how at some point of the game, about halfway point of the game, you return to Saboteur Coast. It's a port city, the second hub that you could visit after the first hub, which is a mountain village. If you go to Saboteur Coast after, let's say, the halfway or the 2/3 marker, you will learn from some of the NPCs in Saboteur Coast that Miranda and Alonso, two of your party members at the start of the game who left for the rest of the game, have returned to Saboteur at some point in between your not being there. And they'll tell you what's going on with them. They'll say that Miranda and Alonso have hitched together, and they're actually a thing now. So Alonso has become Yuki's father-in-law, because Miranda is Yuki's mother. And that's pretty cool. You never would have learned that had you not revisited Saboteur Coast to talk to the people. That's pretty cool. But outside of that, Grandia 1 it just had a far better spirit of adventure about it. It just makes me cherish it so much that it's going to be an eternal classic to me, whereas Grandia 3 is just going to be a fun time that I'm probably not going to remember as richly, as fondly as I do Grandia 1. Now, the next category is NPCs. Grandia 3 wins here. The first category the second category that it fully wins in, because it also wins in combat. Grandia 3 wins by a huge margin, due to being able to backtrack to every town. The very first town you visit, by the end of the game, you could still go back there. Due to being able to backtrack to every previous area, unlike in Grandia 1, where you would where you lose track of NPCs and you could learn about their fates and stuff after you left that town on the journey. In Grandia 3, though, you could return to all these towns, and you could talk to everybody. The dialogue's also far better. If I'm being completely honest here, talking with the NPCs in Grandia 3 helped me learn so much about the game, the world, its characters, the lore, the background stuff. It gives me an idea of what the people who made this game intended it to really look like. It gave me a glimpse, a glimpse through their little looking glass into a big world, a massive, ambitious project that I feel got cut, condensed, really small, and we only got to see snippets of it through some of the NPC dialogue. But just from having that, just from getting to see those glimpses, made me appreciate what they were trying to do and what they were unable to do was forgiven. You could, your characters, like I said, talked back to the NPCs, which helped me learn a lot about your characters, because in the main storyline, we don't really get any character growth with a lot of these people. So by talking to the NPCs, we get to see what pisses them off, what makes them happy, what makes them want to help other people. We learn that Yuki just has he's pretty much a chaotic neutral, a chaotic good character, so he's always thinking outside the box and saying, hey, maybe this might not be the legal thing to do, but this other thing is the right thing to do. And he's offering some new points of view for some of these NPCs. Alfina is just overall kind to everybody. She's very naive, and she gets taken advantage of. And Yuki and Ulf come in to say, hey, you're being taken advantage of. Alonso is very much the father figure for what little of the game we got to see him with, but we get to learn so much about his character by talking to the NPCs in Mendi and in Saboteur Coast that we got to see that he was not just a playboy, but he was also very worldly and experienced. Miranda, the mother of Yuki, that we meet at the very first part of the game, whom you thought was going to be with you for the rest of the game, she leaves very early to run off with Alonso to get hitched and explore the world, because Alonso's a ship captain. He wants to map the entire ocean, and Miranda just gets roped into that and runs off with that. You get the idea that Yuki's father was very much a lot like Alonso, and she got roped into that very young. Miranda is 34 years old. Yuki is 16. She had Yuki very young, and their relationship was very much a sibling relationship, because she wasn't ready to be a mother. She's still very much young at heart. You get to see so much about this character by talking to the NPCs. It's very good. It's very, very good. And I actually cared about these NPCs as well. In most of these towns, you have a couple of these NPCs who share storylines. After each portion of the main plot, for example, after every dungeon, you can return to a town, and almost everybody has something new to say. There are running plot lines for a lot of these characters, and I'm going to mention one or two of them. One in Mendi, which is the main hub world, the main big city in the game's world. By the port of Mendi, there are two characters. There is a wayward sailor, and then there is Nina. Nina and Jerry. Jerry's the sailor. And Jerry, we talk to him first. We don't see where Nina is for the first visit to Mendi. But after each about 4 or 5 big cutscene moments, Jerry has new things to say. When we first arrive to Mendi, we can talk to Jerry, and Jerry says he can hear the sea calling to him, and that he needs to go out to sea, but he is torn, because he has a lover here in Mendi called Nina. And they are hitched. They're going to get married and all that stuff. And he's unsure if he wants to propose to her now, or if he should wait until he comes back. And your characters talk to him about that. And after one of the big cutscenes in Mendi, if he returned to the port, Jerry has new things to say. He is still conflicted, but he has new things to tell you. He's got more things to get off his chest. And he's a little bit more convinced to go out to sea one final time. And then we do another story bit in Mendi, and we're about to leave. And then we go back to the port city. If you go back to the port city, we talk to Jerry again. You learn that he is now ready to leave. He's ready to go, and he was not going to say goodbye to Nina. He was just going to leave. And you get, and Ulf berates him. I think it was Ulf. or was it Alonso? One of the two berates Yuki. Might have even berated him, I don't know, but he gets berated by your party members about not telling Nina, who loves him very much, that he was going to go off to sea for a while and not come back for a long time. So by the fourth visit to him, Nina is there finally. We get to talk to her, and she's upset that he was going to leave without telling her, and they have a thing, and then Cherry finally goes out to sea. And for the next half of the game, Nina is going to be standing by the lighthouse, staring out into sea. She's going to be depressed. She's going to be waiting for Jerry to come back. And each time you visit Mendy after each major story beat in the main plotline, Nina is going to have new things to say. She's going to have new outlooks on life. She's going to accept that Jerry has gone off to sea, and now she's going to work on herself. She's going to work on her own personality. She's going to work on her own getting through this time apart, and all that stuff. And then by the end of the game, something very bad happens. If you visit Saboteur Coast during the final parts of the game, you find this old lady in one of the huts in Saboteur Coast, and she has found a ship's log washed up on the beach alongside some wreckage. And in it is Jerry's final log entry about how he came into contact with a lot of crazy crap from the big final boss Zorn out at sea, and his crew turned to glass, turned to crystal, and shattered before his very eyes, and he feared that he was going to share that same fate. And then the journal ends. And you fear the worst for Jerry here. So immediately you have to go back to Mendy to talk to Nina to find out if she's learned about this, or see if your characters could tell her about this. And we find that Nina has been roped into this fake F-A-U-X, this faux prophet, fishmonger guy, who has been telling people prophecies about the future. And Nina has been roped into this out of a desire to feel better about her foreboding pain and a sense of loss that she's starting to feel, that she feels that Jerry's not going to come back. So you get to go through this storyline next and try to deal with the faux fishmonger prophet dude, and there's a whole other storyline plotline around that. And then by the final part of the game, Nina she realizes the fishmonger's a fake storyteller. He's a fake prophet, but she needs something to help her keep going, because otherwise she's just gonna stand by that lighthouse and wait for him and just not live her life. She's just gonna fade away. And it pains you because your characters cannot tell her about that log entry that you learn about in Saboteur Coast from the old lady. I like to if I can remember this correctly, I'm not entirely sure because I didn't pay too much attention to the end credits. There was a slideshow showing various characters doing things or whatever. I'd like to imagine that in one of those end credits slides, we see Jerry return to Mindyport and reunite with Nina. But that's just one storyline. With all these NPCs, that's just one. There's so many more in all of these towns that you could learn about. All of these characters. In Rafflet Town, there is a newlywed couple that has the outsider husband needing to prove himself to the disgruntled hunter father, and says, this is just some ace pilot, he's gonna hit you and then he's gonna leave you, and he has to prove himself to the girl's father, and that's a nice little storyline. Then there's another storyline of a pilot whose plane crashed, and this young lady was nursing him back to health, and that he was starting to get close to her. There's another one about in the mountain village where you learn about how this crazy lady got lost in the woods and vanished, and then she came back, and you learn that she was actually in the first realm. The first realm is an alternate dimension where all of this glass and chaos crap is seeping into the main world from. And she goes in there and she finds a crystallized glass bird, and she brings it back to the main world, into the world, the main game world that you're playing in, and the glass bird turns back to real flesh birdness and flies away, and she keeps it as a pet for her husband. And she was initially going to keep it because she thought it was Diamond. But there's so much in the regards to these NPCs and what they have to say that I couldn't get enough of it. I spent more time in the towns than I did in the dungeons, yet again, learning about these characters, learning their stories, learning about their woes, and doing various side quests about talking to this guy, then you gotta talk to this guy, then you gotta talk to that guy, then you gotta go back to this investigator dude and tell him what you learned from talking to everybody. The game is designed to be social, to talk to all of these characters and learn about them, and your party members as well. The world is lived in. The world feels lived in despite the limitations of the game's hardware, of the time constraints, of the cut content. You still see that glimpse of what this world could have been. And that is amazing to me. A lot of RPGs could learn from the Grandia series and when it comes to NPCs and character building. Grandia 1 slips ahead of 3 in many categories. In characters, it's very neck and neck, I'll be honest, in regards to like the NPCs and the character interactions. But 1 slips ahead in regards to overallness. Overall, Grandia 1's just a better game. It's just the better experience. But I don't want to say that Grandia 3 is not worth playing. It is definitely worth playing. It is pretty short, too. It's a short game. You're probably going to beat it in about 20-30 hours if you don't rush it. Me, I took my time. I took about 60 hours on this game. But that's because I revisited every town. I talked to everybody multiple times to get every snippet of dialogue from everybody that I could get. And I learned so much, and I felt like I felt connected to all of these NPCs in a way that I just hadn't felt in any other franchise. None of them. Not even Dragon Quest VIII, which comes the closest to doing this. In Dragon Quest VIII, like I mentioned in my Grandia 1 review, after certain parts of the story have been completed, you can return to older towns, and some of the NPCs have new things to say. But it's mostly your party members that have new things to say. You press the start button to open up your party member, and you can talk to everybody, and they'll have something to say about the town that you visited. And they'll interact with each other, and that's just an amazing thing. I'll have my own review about Dragon Quest VIII at some point. It's gonna be far longer than this video. Dragon Quest VIII is my favorite game of all time, if you haven't gathered that yet. But Grandia 3 is amazing. It is amazing. It's not as good as Grandia 1. Grandia 1 I would consider a classic. I would consider it timeless. I would consider it up there with Chrono Trigger, with Final Fantasy VII. It is a game that you will experience, and you will remember that experience for many, many years. Despite not having gone back to replay it, you will still remember Grandia 1 long after it's gone. Grandia 3 is not that kind of experience. Grandia 3 is the experience you would get from, say, Return of the Jedi. Return of the Jedi is a very good film. It is a very, very good film. But you remember that original trilogy for Empire. You remember Empire Strikes Back, you remember A New Hope, but Return of the Jedi, the Ewoks, and all that other stuff, it's a fun little experience, but it just doesn't have what those first two films had. It has a nice payoff, and it definitely has a very nice payoff. It has the Luke and Vader thing. You have the Vader going and taking out the Emperor and all that stuff. We have a finality about it, but it just didn't have that air, that Empire, that New Hope had. That's what Grandia 3 is. Grandia 3 is the Return of the Jedi of this trilogy. It is not the best, but it is definitely far from the least in regards to quality, in regards to how good it is. It's worth watching because it's worth playing all three of these games. I'm definitely going to get around to playing the second one at some point. But yeah, that is my review for this. But in terms of the main game's plot, the voice cutscenes, the villains and their motivations, a lot of that suffers greatly in 3, whereas 1 gave us a lot of time with the villains. In fact, I would say that some of the villains in Grandia 1, namely, I like to call him the Prince Dude, because he's just the Prince Dude. He's the son of General Ball. General Ball is the big bad, big meanie-faced dude, and his son is a colonel. But it's basically king. Ball wants to be a king, so I'm gonna let him have the king thing. So that his son would be the prince, the royal dynasty of the military and all that stuff. Colonel, whatever, what's his face? I'm forgetting everybody's names again, but that colonel has so many cuts, so much time dedicated to him. After every dungeon you go through in Grandia 1, we swap scenes to the Colonel Dude and how he's feeling, and how he's taking care of things, and how he's reacting to Justin's exploits throughout the world, and how he's reacting. Oh, Justin's followed us into this part of the world. That is something that I can respect him for. Or, oh, Justin has gotten in our way here. I need to go after him. Or, oh, my father is such a meanie face. I have this desire to get his approval, but I also feel like he's doing things wrong, and I need to change things for the better. And then you get a mutiny, where the son mutinies against the father. There's so much going on with the villains in Grandia 1. It is incredible. In Grandia 3, we barely spend any time with any of these villains. We have Emilius, who is the older brother of Alfina. We spend the most time with him in regard of all of the villains, though the most time would probably be no time at all. He's just the one we see the most, and we barely see him to begin with. So we barely see his motivations. We barely know how he feels, except for how Alfina feels about how he feels. We spend some time with Alfina and how she feels about her brother, but we never spend time with her brother, Emilius, and how he feels about her and everything else going on. We just can get the barest gist of what he feels. And then he's got a bunch of cronies. He's got this blonde crony dude who we meet at the start of the game, whose name I can't remember. We're just going to call him Carter. Carter tries to kidnap Alfina, and we stop him, and then he keeps showing up here and there and here and there alongside this girl whose name I never learned, who I guess has motivations because she wants to boing Emilius. I think that's her only motivation for being here. We have no idea what her backstory is. We have no idea what Carter's backstory is. We have no idea what Grau's backstory is. We have no idea who any of these guys are. Who are these villains? Why are they there? What are their motivations? What's the point of Emilius gathering these 4 people behind him? And we know nothing. In Grandia 1, we've learned so much about all of these villains and their motivations and why they're doing what they're doing, that they feel like fleshed out characters that we can empathize with and sympathize with and actually understand why they're being villainous here. Ball is just the classic Disney villain. Colonel Dude is just the classic son of the Disney villain who feels a little conflicted but wants to get the father's approval, but is ultimately a decent dude in the end. Colonel's assistant is the sister of Fina, and she wants to do the right thing, but she's also in love with the Colonel Dude, and she's going to be following Colonel Dude's goals and aspirations to save the world in her own way, and that way is in conflict with Fina and Justin. There's so much going on with Grandia 1, and it's been almost half a year since I played it, and I still remember all of these story beats. I'm going to be forgetting all of these motivations of Emilius and his cronies because they just didn't exist. I'm not going to remember them after a few years. I'm still going to remember General Ball and those villains of Grandia 1 years later. There's so much in Grandia 1 that's just classic and timeless. Grandia 3 is worth playing for the combat, for the world, for talking to the NPCs if you're into doing that like I am. But if you're not into doing that like I am, then the only reason to play Grandia 3 is for the combat. The good combat system. It'll probably give you about 20 hours of fun playtime, and then you beat in the game, and then it's on to something else. Grandia 3 is a good time. I want to encourage you strongly to play it despite all of these faults, because I personally feel like these faults are cutting room floor, are time constraints, are products of a studio that just didn't have enough time to do what they wanted to do with this game. And I honestly believe that, because at the 2/3 marker, when we're getting into the final act of the game story, we return from the first realm. We spent a long time in the first realm. We finally return from the first realm. We've teleported back to the main world in some far off remote location, far from the desert town where our character Donna is from. And we go through like 5 or 6 big, massive dungeons with big, expansive, different biomes. And the only story we get here is that this part is where all of the run water from this plains area, I forget the name, Baku's Plains or Bakano Plains, something plains. It's a very, very wet, very green area. It's plains lands where you could find some sheep and kill those guys and obtain a good item called the Lucky Book that you could equip to your characters to get some good stuff out of that. And then you go through this plains area, into one of my favorite dungeons in the entire game, and you know nothing about it. There's 2 areas here. The first area is this big fort, this fort that is surrounded by the undead enemies, skeletons, necromancers, demons. They have besieged these ruins, this crumbling fort, this crumbling massive castle, scaling up the mountainside. And you go up, you scale through this fort, killing all of the demons and the skeletons and the creatures, to scale up a long staircase going up to the summit of the mountain. And at the top of this mountain is a beautiful ruins of a castle. And we get to go out into the castle's courtyard, where there's a beautiful gazebo, shining, crystalline, clean waters, and there's no story here. We have no idea what this place is. We have no idea what this dark fort at the base of the mountain on the other side was. We don't know what society used to live here. This is just the ruins, the remnants of a story that I feel they were able to do the dungeon part, but they couldn't get the rest in on time. But they had really cool dungeons, so they thought, let's keep that in. Let's add that. Let's keep that in for content for the game, because we're pretty starved for it to begin with. And after we pass through this beautiful mountaintop, we go down the other side of the mountain. It's starting to get dry. It's starting to get close to the desert biome of the Bacularan desert. We go to the dungeons called the dig site, the archaeological dig site, where I believe there used to be people here. There's a bunch of wooden buildings and things. So the big society used to be here. They've built on-site living quarters where they can live and dig and investigate things. And all the people are gone. And this place has been overrun by these little bandit goblin creatures. We get the idea. We can infer as much as we want in regards to the story what happened to these places. Like, the bandit goblins came in and drove the archaeologists out, but what were they digging for? What were the archaeologists looking for? What was this dig site for? We don't know. The game doesn't tell you. There's nothing here for the story. We learn nothing about this place. I, as a gamer, with all of my imagination and questions that I had for all of these dungeons that we just scrolled through, I get the inference that this place was uncovering an ancient culture. And then if these archaeologists just went to the mountains and came up to the top of the mountains, they would find the ruins of this lost civilization. And when they scale down, they'll find the big dark fortress surrounded by the undead. There's just so much here in this one part of the game where there's no cutscenes, there's no dialogue. At the mountain top, with the beautiful crystalline gazebo and the waters and all that stuff, We fight a boss fight, sure, we get to fight a boss, but this boss, we learn nothing about. It's just some dude that screeches at you. He's following Emilius and the girl and Carter and Grau, and he's part of his cronies, but we have no idea who he is. We never learned who he is. He just shows up here, he fights you, and then he leaves. That's disappointing, but I also get the feeling there was something here. There used to be something here. There was a plan to put something big here. Mendi is the only big city. We have 2 smaller villages in Rafflet Town and Bacula. Then we have the tiny village and the mountain village. I forget the name. And then we have the Sapatar Coast, which is basically just the place to go for the casino. I didn't mention that, but there's a mini game called Arranged Dice that you could play at the casino in Sapatar Coast to obtain casino tokens to exchange for items that you can't get anywhere else. So it's a pretty good place to go. And Arranged Dice is pretty addicting to play. It's a very fun game. But yeah, there's not that much to do. This is a big world that is empty because there's just not enough here. There's just not enough content here. This feels like an ambitious game. They were planning to put so much more here. And I was trying to... You could fly around the world map. I forgot to mention this part. You can fly around the world map in Yuki's airplane. I don't know if I mentioned this in a previous cut or in this cut, but Yuki is a character that wanted to be a pilot. And he became one. He was able to meet Schmidt, who is a famous pilot who lives in Mendi, who gives him an airplane. And he gets to fly this airplane, and this is how you get backtrack to various previous dungeons and towns and all that stuff, is with the plane. And as you're flying around the world map, I was trying to find the ruins that I had just gone through after I left Bacula to go to the first realm. And then we came back to the Baku's Plains or whatever, and I was trying to find the Baku's Plains. I was trying to find that mountaintop castle. I was trying to find the fort city at the base on the other side of the mountainside that separates the desert from the green lands. And I was trying to find that in the world map, but I couldn't find it. It wasn't there. I get the idea that they had so much more they wanted to put into this game. And I am really curious to know if any of these developers, if they're still around, they still remember what they did and what they worked on with this. I would love to know what they had actually planned to put for all of those dungeons, for all of these places. What was the big story going to originally be? I would love to see like a director's cut remake of this game with all of the stuff they intended to put back into it. Make Grandia 3 the classic that Grandia 1 was. That's what I would love to see. That was a little bit of a tangent that I went off on the end. I didn't write that down to read through, but I felt like that was worth mentioning because I didn't see that mentioned anywhere in regards to all of the reviews that I have looked at for Grandia 3, all of the gameplay ideas that people had inferred from, and what their thoughts and their points of view from. I didn't see many people talking about the big castle, the big castle at the top of the mountain, the dungeon with the dark creatures, and the dig site, the archaeological dig site. That was the most interesting part of the game for me, is because we learned nothing about it, and I want to know what that is. What was this society? Who built this fort? Who built the gazebo at the top of the mountain? Who built all this stuff? What were they digging for in this archaeological dig site? Who were the people digging for that stuff? Where did everybody go? I had so many questions, and they will never be answered, I fear. But Grandia 3 is still worth playing, despite all of the content that isn't there. For the little content that is there, and for the amazing gameplay, the amazing combat, it is worth your time to play Grandia 3.